Good morning, YouTube. Scott Off-Road. How you doing today? Well, I'm in the garage getting my butt kicked. This isn't good. Jeep's dead. Come along, let's see what we're doing. Alright, we're in the garage. This project has been going for a couple days. I guess a week and a half ago, started the Jeep and it acted like the starter was going bad. It would crank and then the solenoid would disengage. So I'd stop, go to restart it, solenoid wouldn't engage on the starter, stop, and start right up. Or sometimes it would try to start, and then the solenoid would disengage, and then I'd go to restart it and it'd start fine. And then most of the time it just started normally. So I'm not sure. I was going, well, the starter must be going out. I haven't changed it when I changed the motor, so I'm just kind of waiting for it to go. Well, it went yesterday. Got home, started up at work, no issues, drove it home, parked it in the driveway. Was working in the house, a couple hours later went to leave, and it was dead. And all it would do is click. Now, on a dead battery, every dead battery I've had, when it clicks, it goes click, 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 click. That's not the click I'm getting. And when I've done YouTube searches on what's wrong, or ideas to be what's wrong, they're all talking about that rapid click. It doesn't work, and it's a dead battery. And again, that's not what the issue is. So let me jump in real quick and let you hear what I'm hearing. All right, so as you heard, it's just click, 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 not the rapid click, 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 dead battery. So, took the starter out. Took it in, brought home a new starter, put the new starter in, same problem. In fact, the sound you're hearing is with the new starter in. And that didn't make sense to me. So I checked the battery. Battery's got over 12 volts. Checked the battery voltage at the starter, over 12 volts, they matched. Tells me I got good continuity between the starter and the battery. Put the voltmeter on and cranked the engine, and I was still over 12 volts, which tells me my cold cranking amps is still good on the battery, and it is a new battery. The battery's less than a year old. It turns a year old this month, and it's an Optima red top. I'm confident the battery is good, based on no drop in voltage when you're cranking it. But I am taking it out today and I'm gonna have it ruled out, but I'm confident that's good. So what I've done so far and where I'm at is there's three things that could be wrong that I can think of: ignition, ground, or positive wire. It's a connection issue somewhere. Something's not right. I took the small wire off the starter, and the starter is a 2-wire starter, and I jumped from the large terminal, which has 12 volts, to the small terminal, which is the ignition. So with that wire unhooked, I've completely bypassed all of the ignition. The ignition switch, which is a common issue, which is what most of the YouTube videos say is your issue, that's taken out of the loop. Anything from that wire up into the wire looms is taken out of the loop. If the issue was with the ignition switch, ignition wiring, somewhere in there, when I jumped from the large terminal to the small terminal, the starter would have cranked and started. And it didn't. I got the same clicking I'm getting now. So that rules out the ignition. So I took a large jumper cables, actual jumper cables, and went from the positive on the battery down underneath the Jeep and hooked to that large terminal on the starter, reconnected the ignition exciter wire, and cranked it. Guess what? Same clicking I'm getting again. So what that rules out is a bad wire between the battery and the starter, because I now have 2 wires going there. I should have more than enough to get there, and I don't. So I go to the last option, which is checking ground. I hook negative on the battery to a good ground on the block, which I use the alternator bolt and the alternator bracket, and the starter is grounded out to the block. I check continuity between the battery and the block, and I do have continuity, so I know I've got a good circuit there. Same issue, it just clicks. So I don't know what's going on. Took the starter out of the engine, set it on the exhaust, so it was grounded on a piece of metal, and if the engine were locked up, that could be part of that could be the issue. But it's still, even with the starter sitting on the exhaust, not hooked to the flywheel, not connected in any way to the flywheel, just sitting loose, it's the same click, which tells me, okay, I got a bad starter. Run it back to the auto parts store, have them bench test it. It bench tests fine. There's nothing wrong with the new starter. They didn't have another one there to check against, but they did have my old core, and I had them test that, and that actually tested as bad solenoid was out. So initially the solenoid and starter on my Jeep was bad. I diagnosed that right. I was right on track. I just don't know why the new starter isn't firing or isn't engaging. It sounds like, and when you're underneath the Jeep right at the starter, it's really loud. It's obviously the clicking is coming from there, or the ticking, or whatever you want to call that. It's coming from the starter, but I don't know why it's not catching or hitting the it's hitting the flywheel, or something's hitting. I don't know. So that's where I'm at. That's what the diagnosis so far. Got a feeling this is going to be a long video. I've talked to Matt about this. I've talked to a buddy, Brad. Brad's convinced it's a connection issue. And he's helped me with a lot of the troubleshooting, getting where I'm at. I've talked to Matt. He's also helped me get to where I'm at with the troubleshooting. He's more concerned that maybe there's a pinched wire from the engine swap. But the issue with that is, again, I've bypassed the positive wire from the battery, and I've bypassed the entire ignition wire harness in the troubleshooting. So if that were the issue, it would have started by now. The engine does start. I can pull it behind the pickup and bump start it, and it'll start and run fine, runs normally. It just, the starter will not engage. So I've got both of them stumped too. We're all kind of scratching our heads at this one. But Matt's also thinking it's a bad battery. I'm not so sure on that, but we are going to pull the battery and we are going to take it in and have it bench tested just in case. Maybe there is a bad cell in that. I don't know. But that's where we're at. When I put the motor in, if you watch that series, I cleaned all the wires, cleaned all the terminals, re-loomed all the wires, checked all the wires. So I'm confident all my wiring is good. I just broke the positive and negatives off of the Optima. just to rule out maybe a bad connection on that ground, but again, I'm confident that it's good. And these are just extras I put on the top of the battery since it had post and side mounts. I use these for the winch and all other connections. Make sure you let people know about that when they're working on it, because I've had people unhook my battery and not realize it had side posts. So again, I've just unhooked the ground, rehooked up the ground. Everything's been checked. I just want to do one more check on it. Seriously? Seriously? Well, what I have unhooked and rehooked up here, the positive side terminal last night, the negative side terminal last night, and the negative top terminal, which would be the winch, the ground for an accessory inside, I believe it's the radio, the ham radio, and then I just now unhooked the positive, which would be the ham radio, two accessory fuse panels, and the winch, and then the side terminal. So, and it started. So we're going to take the side terminal off the battery again, because that's not as pretty as I want. That connection looks good. That's a little dirty. So I'm going to wire brush that real quick. Positive terminal's cleaned, put back on. I'm going to take the negative off. That's clean. We're just going to hit this real quick just to be thorough. Okay, terminals are on. Everything's cleaned. Make sure it starts. Alright, now let's take this one step further. Was it a bad connection on the battery, which would have been the positive to the starter? Which again, I had that bypass, so I don't know why that would have mattered. It should have narrowed down by jumping it. I digress. Or is something else shorted out? Because I had other things hooked to the battery, maybe that was shorting things out. So, do the hand radio last. It's the smallest. Again, these terminals are good and clean. That's positive. That's negative. Nice and tight. Haven't hooked anything up yet, just the terminal guard. So, let's start with the big wire, which would be my starter, or my winch. Cleaning up the negative. Okay, let's see if it starts. So we've ruled out the problem being the winch. Next thing we're going to do is one of my fuse panels. See what happens. Alright, so we ruled out that fuse panel. Next thing we're going to hook up is the front fuse panel. But let's see if this starts. Yeah. Okay. So we ruled that out. It's not the second fuse panel. Last thing to hook up is the ham radio. So everything's good and tight. Let's see what happens. We figured out it wasn't any of that. It must have just been a bad connection on the positive going to the battery. Why I couldn't go from the battery positive down to the starter and have it start is beyond me. I don't know. But maybe I was using the cheap of the cheap jumper cables. Maybe that wire isn't as good as it should be. Don't know. Yeah, it wasn't as big as a project as I thought it would be. It was and is a connection issue. So, as always, remember, you fix the Jeep fixes you. Have a blessed day.